You missed the Hendricks call. Do you understand what that means? $12 million, and you let it slip through because you couldn't manage a calendar.
I sent 3 reminders. You told me to cancel anything before 9.
I never said cancel, Hendricks.
You said cancel everything before 9, Mr. Cross.
Julian's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to being corrected, and he definitely wasn't used to being corrected calmly. You have 30 seconds to explain why I shouldn't fire you right now. Elena's hands were shaking at her sides, but her voice didn't waver. Because if you fire me, my father doesn't get his medication this month. That's not an excuse, Mr. Cross. That's just the truth. So, if firing me makes you feel better, go ahead. But I did my job. You changed the plan and forgot to tell me. The office went silent. For the first time in longer than he could remember, Julian Cross didn't have a response ready. Before we go any further, tell me where you're watching from tonight. I love seeing how far this community stretches across the world, so drop your city in the comments before we continue. Julian sat down slowly behind his desk. Reschedule Hendricks for tomorrow morning. 9 sharp. Yes, sir. She turned to leave. He watched her go and, for reasons he couldn't explain, didn't look away from the door for several seconds after it closed. Julian Cross was the most talked-about bachelor in Chicago, and he built his entire life around staying that way. CEO of Cross Enterprises by 29, worth more than most people could count, and famous for a temper that had ended 3 assistants' careers in under a year. Women wanted him. Men feared crossing him. His own employees called him the workaholic devil behind his back, and he knew it, and he didn't care. You go through assistants faster than quarterly reports, his mother told him over dinner one night. Maybe if you tried being human for 5 minutes. I don't need an assistant who's my friend, Julian said. I need one who does the job. And how many of those have you had this year? 4. Julian. They weren't good enough. His mother set down her wine glass. Or you scared them off before they had the chance to be. He didn't answer that. Elena Ward hadn't wanted the job at Cross Enterprises specifically. She'd wanted any job that paid enough to cover her father's medication, which by that point cost more every month than her mother's 2 jobs combined could reliably provide. 15 years earlier, her father had been hit by a delivery truck crossing the street 2 blocks from their apartment, and he'd never walked again. Her mother worked mornings at a diner and nights cleaning offices downtown, and Elena had watched her come home too exhausted to speak more nights than she could count. You don't have to take this job, her mother told her the night before the interview. Cross Enterprises has a reputation. People don't last there. I need this job, Mom, Elena said. It pays almost double what I'd make anywhere else. We need that. I don't want you working for someone who treats people badly. I can handle badly, Elena said. I've handled worse. Her mother didn't argue after that. She just held Elena's hand across the table a little longer than usual before they said goodnight. The interview lasted 6 minutes. Julian barely looked up from his phone the entire time. Why should I hire you over the 12 other applicants sitting outside? He asked. Because I won't waste your time asking questions that don't matter, and I won't quit after 2 weeks like the last 3 did, Elena said. I need this job. That means I'll work harder to keep it than someone who doesn't. Julian finally looked up. Everyone says that in interviews. Everyone else in this building has a fallback if it doesn't work out, Elena said. I don't. So you're not just hiring an assistant, Mr. Cross. You're hiring the one person in that waiting room who literally cannot afford to fail at this. He hired her the same day. The first month was brutal. Julian tested her the way he tested every assistant, throwing impossible deadlines at her with no warning, changing plans without telling her, snapping over mistakes that weren't hers to begin with. Elena absorbed all of it without complaint, because complaint was a luxury she didn't have room for. Coffee's cold, he said one morning, not looking up from his monitor. I'll get you a new one. Don't bother. Just don't bring me cold coffee again. It wasn't cold when I brought it 15 minutes ago. You were in a meeting. Then time it better. I'll time it exactly as well as you tell me how long your meetings will actually run, Elena said, setting a fresh cup down without waiting for a response. Which is never, because you never tell me. Julian looked up at that. Nobody talked to him like that. Nobody who wanted to keep their job anyway. You've got a mouth on you, he said. I've got deadlines on me, Elena said. The mouth is free. Enjoy it while it lasts. She walked out before he could respond, and for the second time in a month, Julian Cross found himself staring at a closed door with no idea what to say. He started noticing things about her he hadn't meant to notice. The way she never took a full lunch break. The way she wore the same 3 blazers on rotation, always pressed, always immaculate, no matter how worn the fabric looked up close. The way she answered his calls even past midnight without a single complaint, her voice steady no matter how late it was or how sharp his tone had gotten. You didn't have to pick up, he told her once, calling at nearly 1 in the morning about a document he could have waited to ask about. You called, Elena said. That's the job. Most people would let it go to voicemail this late. Most people aren't me, she said, and hung up to go find the document. Julian sat with his phone in his hand for a long moment after that call ended. He asked Daniel from HR to pull her file a week later, telling himself it was standard due diligence, though he'd never once asked for a standard employee's file before. He read through it twice. Father, disabled, home care. Mother, 2 jobs. No siblings listed. Emergency contact information that traced back to an apartment in a part of the city he'd never had a reason to drive through. He didn't say anything to her about it, but something in the way he looked at her changed after that, even if he couldn't have explained exactly how. The office noticed before Elena did. Whispers started in the break room about the new assistant who'd lasted longer than any of the others, about the way Julian's temper seemed to cool by a few degrees whenever she was in the room, about the fact that he'd started actually eating the lunches she reminded him to order instead of skipping meals entirely like he used to. He likes her, one of the marketing coordinators said in the break room, not realizing Elena was 2 feet away refilling her water bottle. He doesn't like anyone, another one said. He tolerates her. There's a difference. Elena didn't say anything. She filled her water bottle and walked back to her desk with her expression carefully blank, the same way she'd learned to keep it blank through 15 years of watching her family struggle without ever once letting anyone see it cost her anything. The turning point came on a Tuesday when Elena's phone rang during a board meeting, something she never allowed to happen. She silenced it immediately, but it rang again 30 seconds later. And again. By the 4th call, her hands were visibly shaking and Julian, mid-sentence in front of 6 board members, stopped talking entirely. Take it, he said. Sir, I can't. We're in the middle of. Take it, Elena. Now. She stepped out into the hallway, and Julian watched through the glass wall as her face went white, then crumpled entirely. He excused himself from the meeting without explanation and followed her out. What happened? My father, Elena said, barely able to get the words out. He collapsed. They're taking him to the hospital. I need to. I don't have a way to get there right now. I don't have. My car is downstairs, Julian said. Let's go. Mr. Cross, you have a board meeting. The board can wait. Your father can't. He drove her himself, breaking 3 traffic laws Elena would later swear she never actually saw him break because she was too busy staring straight ahead, trying not to fall apart in the passenger seat of her boss's car. At the hospital, Julian sat beside her in the waiting room for 4 hours without checking his phone once, something his own staff would have called impossible if they'd been there to witness it. You don't have to stay, Elena said quietly around hour 2. I know, Julian said. You have a company to run. I know that too. So, why are you still here? Julian was quiet for a long moment. Because you've spent every day for the last 3 months making sure nothing falls apart around me. I figured it was time somebody made sure nothing fell apart around you. Elena's eyes filled with tears she'd been fighting back for hours. That's the nicest thing you've ever said to me. Don't get used to it, Julian said, but there was no bite in it this time. Her father stabilized by morning. A cardiac scare, serious but treatable, requiring a new round of medication that Elena knew, doing the math in her head even through her exhaustion, her family couldn't fully afford on top of everything else. She didn't say that part out loud. She didn't have to. 3 days later, an anonymous donation covered the entirety of her father's new treatment plan, routed through a charitable fund with no name attached that anyone in her family could trace. Elena had a guess. She didn't confront Julian about it, not at first, mostly because she wasn't sure what she'd even say if she was right. She found out for certain 2 weeks later, catching a glimpse of an approval document on his desk that she wasn't supposed to see, his signature at the bottom beside the exact dollar figure that matched her father's new treatment plan almost to the cent. "You didn't have to do that," she said, closing his office door behind her. Julian didn't look up from his screen. "Do what?" "Don't," Elena said. "I saw the document. I know it was you." He set his pen down slowly. "It wasn't a big deal." "It was a huge deal, Julian." It was the first time she'd used his first name without the title attached, and neither of them missed it. "That's my father's life. You can't just fix that and act like it's nothing." "I didn't do it to be thanked." "Then why did you do it?" Julian stood up, crossing the room slowly, stopping close enough that Elena had to tilt her head back to keep looking at him. "Because for 3 months, you've shown up every single day and done a job most people quit after 2 weeks, without ever once asking me for anything in return. Not a raise, not a favor, not even a thank you when I was cruel to you, which was often. I wanted, for once, to give you something you didn't have to earn first. That's not how the world works, Julian. People like me don't get things we didn't earn." "Then let this be the first time," he said quietly. The office rumor mill exploded within the month once people noticed the pattern. Julian personally reviewing Elena's schedule instead of leaving it to her. Julian canceling dates with a string of women he usually kept in casual rotation. Julian, for the first time in the history of Cross Enterprises, actually smiling at something that wasn't a closed deal. Not everyone was thrilled. Priscilla Vance, the daughter of one of Cross Enterprises' largest shareholders, and the woman Julian's mother had been not so subtly pushing him toward for over a year, made her feelings known directly. "She's your assistant," Priscilla said, cornering Elena near the elevator one afternoon. "Do you understand what people are saying about you? About what kind of assistant gets driven home in the CEO's car twice a week?" "I don't control what people say," Elena said evenly. "You should control what you let them have reason to say." Priscilla's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Julian doesn't fall for people like you. He falls for convenience. Don't confuse the two, sweetheart. It'll save you a lot of embarrassment later." Elena didn't repeat that conversation to Julian. She didn't need to. Priscilla made sure he heard a version of it herself, framed carefully enough to sound like concern rather than a warning. "People are talking," Priscilla told him over a dinner his mother had arranged. "About you and your assistant. It's not a good look for the company, Julian. Investors notice these things." "Investors care about quarterly numbers," Julian said. "Not who I have lunch with. They care about stability, about predictability. A CEO involved with his own assistant reads as exactly the kind of instability the board doesn't want walking into the next funding round." "Is that concern for the company?" Julian asked. "Or concern for yourself?" Priscilla didn't answer that directly, which told him everything he needed to know. He found Elena in his office that evening, going over the next day's schedule the way she did every night before leaving. "Priscilla talked to you," he said. It wasn't a question. Elena kept her eyes on the schedule. "It's fine." "It's not fine." "What did she say?" "That people like me don't end up with people like you," Elena said. "That I should save myself the embarrassment. And, what do you think?" Elena finally looked up at him. "I think I've spent 15 years watching my mother work herself into the ground so my father could have dignity in a life that took almost everything else from him. I think I know exactly what it costs to want something you're not supposed to have and choose to fight for it anyway. So no, Julian, I don't think people like me don't end up with people like you. I think people like me are usually the only ones who actually know how to hold on to something once they finally get it." Julian crossed the office and took the schedule out of her hands, setting it aside without looking at it. "Then hold on to this." He kissed her before either of them could talk themselves out of it, and for the first time since he'd taken over Cross Enterprises, Julian Cross stopped thinking about the company entirely, if only for a moment. The board meeting where Priscilla's father tried to force the issue came 3 weeks later, framed as a discussion about executive conduct standards that everyone in the room understood was really about one relationship in particular. "There are concerns," the elder Vance said, about a conflict of interest between yourself and a member of your administrative staff. Elena Ward, Julian said. Say her name. If you're going to discuss my relationship in a board meeting, at least have the decency to use her name. The room went quiet. Ms. Ward has never had access to information she wasn't authorized for, Julian continued. She has never influenced a business decision improperly. Every claim implying otherwise is baseless, and I'll remind this board that Cross Enterprises' quarterly numbers have improved every consecutive month since she started, which is more than I can say for several initiatives this board has personally championed. This isn't about her performance, Vance said. It's about optics. Then let me clarify the optics for you, Julian said. I am not choosing between this company and the woman I love. I built this company. I don't need anyone's permission to decide who stands beside me while I run it. If that's a problem for this board, I'm confident several other boards would be thrilled to have my track record instead. Nobody challenged him again after that. Priscilla left the meeting without a word, and within the month, so did her father's seat on the board, quietly replaced in a restructuring that had technically been in motion long before that meeting, but that everyone in the building understood the timing of anyway. Elena found out about the board meeting secondhand, the way she found out about most things Julian did on her behalf, because he never once told her himself, never once expected credit for defending her the way she'd never once expected credit for staying. You didn't have to say all that, she told him that night. Yes, I did, Julian said. I spent years letting people believe I was exactly as cold as they said I was, because it was easier than letting anyone close enough to prove otherwise. You proved otherwise. The least I can do is say it out loud when it matters. Her father's health continued improving. Her mother, for the first time in 15 years, cut down to a single job, something Elena still hadn't fully allowed herself to feel grateful for out loud, worried that saying it might somehow undo it. Julian never mentioned the money again after that first conversation. He simply kept showing up, at hospital visits, at her mother's small apartment for dinner despite owning a penthouse that could have swallowed the entire building, at every version of her life that had nothing to do with Cross Enterprises at all. You didn't have to come tonight, her mother told him once, setting an extra plate at a table that had never once expected to seat a billionaire. I wanted to, Julian said simply. This is where she comes from. If I want to understand her, I need to understand this too. Elena's mother looked at her daughter across the table, and something in her expression settled, the particular kind of relief that comes only after 15 years of worrying whether anyone would ever be good enough, whether anyone would ever see past the exhaustion and the worn blazers and the careful, guarded silence her daughter had built to survive. 6 months after that first night in the hospital waiting room, Julian proposed to Elena on the same rooftop where he'd once told his mother he had no interest in settling down. No ring hidden in champagne, no elaborate production, just the two of them and a question he'd apparently been holding on to for longer than either of them realized. I built an entire reputation on not needing anyone, he told her. And then you walked into my office and corrected my calendar mistake to my face, and somehow that was the moment I started needing you more than I've ever needed anything in my life. Marry me, Elena. Not because I can fix your problems. Because I don't want to spend one more day pretending I'm better off without you in it. Elena said yes before he even finished pulling the ring from his pocket. The office that had once whispered about the workaholic devil and his assistant spent the next year whispering about something entirely different. The CEO who'd finally softened. The woman who'd walked into the hardest job in the building and walked out engaged to the man everyone swore could never be reached. Nobody who'd watched Elena Ward show up early and stay late for 15 years of survival was surprised in the slightest that she'd been the one to finally reach him. So tell me, do you think love like this is really possible between people from such different worlds? Or was Elena just lucky enough to catch Julian on the right day? Let me know what you think in the comments. And before you go, tell me one more time where you're watching from tonight. I love seeing this community stretch across the world one story at a time. If this one kept you hooked until the very end, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one.